Today's spotlight ingredient is spelt flour. How is it different than wheat, and is it healthier? Hi, I'm Deborah Vidal, and I'm the owner and founder of VidalSpeaks.com, and I've had a 25-year practice right here in the Hollywood Hills, helping hundreds of clients heal from so many different symptoms by transitioning them to a plant-based diet, a clean one, using homeopathic remedies and detox, of course. And today we're going to talk about spelt flour and all about it. But before we get there, I just want to say stay to the end of the video because I'm going to tell you about my favorite two brands. So what is spelt flour anyway? Well, it's an ancient grain and it hasn't been modified or manipulated like wheat. So you could compare it a lot to whole wheat, but it's so old and it's so ancient, and the fact that it hasn't been modified makes it so easy to digest. So this is the biggest benefit of spelt flour, because so many people today have gut issues, and you know how many people are either gluten intolerant or wheat intolerant, and they're both different. So the great thing about spelt flour, although I want you to know it is a gluten flour, so if you're celiac, warning, don't eat spelt flour because it does contain gluten. But if you're wheat intolerant and you have a problem eating whole wheat or wheat products, you may want to try spelt flour, because I had a lot of clients in my practice that thought they couldn't eat wheat, and then they tried spelt flour and they didn't have any problems with it. And that's because of the fact that it hasn't been manipulated. Therefore, it's still in its old ancient form, and it's much easier on our guts to digest. This is the biggest difference about spelt flour. Not only that, it has a delicious flavor, and because it's not as popular, I think that's the reason why it doesn't get easily manipulated. They're trying to keep it in as old a form as possible. Now, before I go on, I just want to ask you guys to please subscribe to my channel and like this video or any of the videos if you've learned something. Okay, so because spelt flour is a primitive relative to wheat, it's very similar to wheat in its nutritional value. So it's not that different. I would say that there's really only two slight differences, and one is that it's a little bit higher in protein, but then it's a little less in fiber. So in the end, it's about the same. So you don't need to worry about the nutritional value if you're getting more from one or the other. But I'm sure that you have the question, but when do I use spelt? Because there's things that are good to use these kind of flours, and then there's things that are not good to make with them. If you're baking bread, I don't highly recommend using spelt flour for, let's say, a sourdough bread, because just like whole wheat, it's not just spelt, but actually any whole grain flour, they're really hard to make rise. And those breads where you get the nice big airy holes, like the one I make here at Soul Canyon Kitchen, I love those big holes in my bread, and you just can't get that with the whole grain flour. So it's not just spelt, but any whole grain flour. So think of it as you're exchanging it for whole wheat in your recipes, not that you're exchanging it for all-purpose flour. So if you like to make your cookies or cakes with whole wheat flour, fantastic, try spelt. If you like to make certain breads or flatbreads or tortillas with whole wheat flour, use spelt. It's fantastic, it tastes delicious, and of course it's different than all-purpose flour. So I bet you're wondering, how can I use spelt flour in my recipes that call for whole wheat? What's the conversion? Well, that's easy. It's just straight 1-to-1. Wherever you use whole wheat, just use spelt. You'll love the taste. The texture is pretty similar to whole wheat, but it's so much healthier because of the fact that it's more easily digestible, and that's huge for so many people. So honestly, if it works for you in your recipes, I would use spelt as often as possible. But I do want to tell you the conversion rate between spelt and all-purpose flour is not 1-to-1. And it's not that you can't just do 1-to-1, it's that the results are going to be totally different, because whole wheat and Spelt Flour have a brand on the outside of them. And when you use those kind of flours, they make your food results more dense. And all-purpose flour, that's all been taken off. So the taste is different, the texture is different, the dough feels different. But there's certain recipes like cakes and muffins and cookies. I love that heartiness and that graininess. And then there's recipe like tortillas. Sometimes they're good whole wheat, but sometimes they're just really good with all-purpose because they're a little bit more stretchy and light, and there's something really nice about them like that. And as I said earlier, breads, it depends what kind of bread you want. If you don't mind those kind of dense breads that don't have the open crumb, then you can use all kinds of whole grain flours, including spelt. So it really depends on what you're trying to do, but any whole grain flour makes the result a little bit more dense, whereas an all-purpose flour makes it a lot lighter and airier, and the taste, of course, is very different, but then so is the nutritional value in the end. So you have to decide what's worth giving up. Okay, now let's get into my favorite two brands. This brand is by 1 Degree. These are both organic. And whenever you're buying any flours or using any flours in your house, please buy organic. It's really important. But these are both organic, and I love both of these companies. I chose these companies because they're very sustainable minded and they really have good farming practices. And this company is made by Azure Standard. You can find them online. It's Azure Market, and they mill all their own spelt, and they triple mill it, and they have a process that's very, very different and super healthy, and I really love this brand also. But what I love about this brand, which is called 1 Degree, is that this is sprouted. And why is sprouted important? Because when you sprout your grains, you're bringing life into the grains, and you're letting out some of the toxins, and you're bringing life, and it's like a bud. So when you bring life into the grain and then they dry it, it adds another element of healthiness to it. But I would be careful using any sprouted spelt in breads. They're usually, they do better without that. So I would use this for my breads, but I use this for all my cakes and my cookies or any desserts that I'm making, or if I'm breading a savory dish like an eggplant or a zucchini, then I always use my sprouted because I like that idea that it's one notch up in being healthy. So I hope you guys try these, and I hope in general that you try Spelt Flour because it's so incredible and I love it so much. And I'm really, really thinking this is my most favorite flour ever, so I wanted to share that with you, and I want you to give it a try. And if you like this video, be sure to check out my other videos because I hope you'll like them too, and give me a thumbs up and please subscribe. Thank you.